Back in the day, like my grandparents' day, more regular people had stocks, and the idea was that every shareholder could vote on things like board elections, mergers and acquisitions, executive compensation, and once in a while, wages. Sort of like democracy for people with disposable income.
Government is the people's business, and every man, woman, and child becomes a shareholder with the first penny of tax paid.
In 1945, 94% of stocks were owned by households, but that's not really how it works anymore. Today, households have more like 40% of the stock market, and about half of that belongs to the top 10%.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Today, the top 1% own 50% of corporate equity and mutual fund shares, while the top 10% own 86%. Did you think this yellow part was everyone else? Nope. The tiny green part on the bottom is the least wealthy half of Americans.
You often hear this argument that what is good for shareholders is good for everyone because, especially in the US, where retirement assets are overwhelmingly invested in corporate equities, everyone is a shareholder. But that's simply not true. The bottom 50% virtually owns no shares at all. The vast majority of shares are held by the top 10%. And within that, even shareholdings are quite concentrated within the top 1%.
And while the strategies corporations choose because asset managers vote for them affect everyone, they only benefit half the population even a little bit and frequently hurt the other half, those without any shares at all. Take the example of worker pay. BlackRock and other asset managers play a huge part in wage stagnation.
If you're a corporation, you can increase profits only in so many ways, and you can always, in the short term, increase returns to shareholders by squeezing workers.
So this kind of uber monopolization really hurts working people, consumers, and even small businesses. And this is where it gets interesting. There's evidence that this type of universal ownership is in part responsible for why everything is so expensive these days. For example, they have significant stakes in Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, and Under Armour. If one outperforms the other, it's the same from BlackRock's point of view, and sometimes it can even lose investors' money altogether if companies were to start lowering prices to compete.
That's the universal ownership logic in action, but it's also an anti-competitive logic in action. The fact that all 5 airlines, all the major banks, for example, in the US have the same large shareholders creates a danger and a risk that these corporations will not engage in competition in the same way they would if they each had different shareholders. Because in that world, each shareholder would root for their company and would hope to outperform the market by the company they waged a bet on.
It's sort of like a neo-monopoly where companies don't even have to merge and buy each other anymore because they all send profits to the same guys no matter what. And their large stakes in basically every company affords them friends in high places. From just 2014 to 2015, BlackRock performed over 1,500 private engagements with the companies held in their portfolio. BlackRock reportedly believes that meetings behind closed doors can go further than votes against management, and they typically give management a year before voting against them. They also have a lot of friends in the government. There's a sort of revolving door between BlackRock, the government, and the international bodies that create monetary policy. Things like the US Treasury, Federal Reserve, the central banks of Canada, some European countries, and Sweden, as well as the International Monetary Fund and the World Economic Forum. Since 2004, BlackRock has hired at least 84 former government officials, regulators, and central bankers worldwide.
The intersection of politics and business has never been more ongoing.
Larry Fink himself is on the board of the WEF and even tried to get himself selected as Hillary Clinton's Treasury Secretary in 2016.